When our parents abandoned my younger brother and me to our own devices, I presented him with an irresistible proposition, one that would plunge us into a whirlwind of thrilling days that would forever change our lives. My name is Rachel, and I could never have foreseen being thrust into a situation like this. My little brother Ethan and I shared an unbreakable bond as we navigated the tumultuous waters of our childhood. He was 5 years my junior, the one I always looked after, shielding him from bullies and guiding him through his studies. Yet, as the days unfolded, life started to pull us apart, each moment steeped in the weight of unspoken choices. I embarked on my college journey, diving into the world of work, while Ethan remained in high school, grappling with the uncertainty of his identity. Our parents were perpetually consumed by their relentless careers, leaving scant moments for the warmth of family connection. They were not neglectful, yet their presence often felt like a ghostly absence. The moment I gained the freedom of the road and the weight of responsibility, I stepped into the role of caretaker for Ethan, shouldering the burden that had long lingered in the shadows. It always felt like a choice, a weighty decision that lingered in the air, heavy with unspoken implications. Yet, beneath his cheerful demeanor lay an unsettling tension, as if he were constantly on the brink of revealing something deeper, something that could shatter the fragile facade of his upbeat nature. Caring for him was anything but a burden. It was an intrinsic part of our identity. Yet everything shifted the moment I left. At 23, I found myself in a modest apartment across town, a place that felt more like a refuge than a home. The weight of my absence pressed heavily on my chest, and guilt clawed at me relentlessly, each thought of Ethan's life slipping away like sand through my fingers. The once carefree little brother I cherished was slowly transforming into a stranger, and the pain of that realization cut deeper than I dared to acknowledge. One fateful weekend, our parents announced their departure for a 3-day business trip, leaving Ethan to face the silence alone. My mother called, her voice trembling with worry. "Will you stand by him?" she inquired, her voice laced with an unspoken urgency. "He's certainly capable of managing on his own, yet the mere thought of your presence brings me a sense of comfort that I desperately crave." My consent came from a deep well of remorse that weighed heavily on my heart. It wasn't as if I had anything monumental planned, yet the thought of spending time with Ethan stirred a deep yearning within me, a desperate attempt to close the widening chasm between us. As I stepped through the threshold, Ethan stood waiting, his crooked smile cutting through the tension like a knife. "Stranger, it feels like an eternity since our paths last crossed." He laughed softly, pulling me into a brief embrace that lingered with unspoken tension. Sure, I replied, a smirk playing on my lips as I rolled my eyes. "Did you truly miss me?" His grin widened, a flicker of something unspoken in his eyes as he stepped aside, allowing me to cross the threshold. The house loomed before me, unchanged yet hauntingly familiar. Immaculate yet infused with a lingering hint of lemon-scented cleanser, evoking a sense of warmth and familiarity. Stepping inside felt hauntingly surreal, as if I had been thrust back into the tumultuous chaos of my teenage years. That first night, we lost ourselves in conversation for what felt like an eternity. Ethan shared his thoughts on school, his friendships, and the weight of his college aspirations, while I revealed the intricacies of my own life. A rush of nostalgia surged through me as I bridged the chasm that had silently grown between us, a bittersweet reminder of what once was. For a time, it felt as though everything remained the same. Yet, as the night deepened, I found myself drawn to the intricacies of Ethan that had escaped my attention before. He had shed the innocence of childhood. He had grown taller, his shoulders now more imposing, and his voice resonated with a newfound depth. He radiated an unsettling calmness and a depth of maturity that struck me with an intensity one had never encountered before. And this completely unsettled me. A chasm of time and change lay between the innocent child I once shielded and the young man now staring back at me, a stranger in so many ways. As the last bite of supper lingered in the air, Ethan's voice broke the silence, suggesting we dive into a movie. He made a comment that lingered in the air as he scrolled through the options on the television, each choice heavy with unspoken possibilities. "This is far from the mundane dramas you relish." "Excuse me," I said, my voice laced with mock indignation. "My selection of films is nothing short of extraordinary." He smirked, a glint of mischief in his eyes, as he finally selected a comedy we had watched countless times before, the weight of unspoken tension hanging in the air. As the opening titles rolled, He collapsed onto the couch beside me, his long legs sprawling out in a way that felt both casual and charged with unspoken tension. For a fleeting moment, it was all too easy to push aside the weight of the world and immerse myself in the here and now. We shared knowing laughs over familiar jokes, recited lines etched in our memories, and fell into a rhythm that felt both comforting and charged with unspoken tension. Yet, in fleeting moments, I caught Ethan's gaze fixed upon me, not in a way that was strange or terrifying, but with a fervor that sent a thrill through my stomach. I brushed it aside, convincing myself that I was merely spiraling into overanalysis. In the end, he is my brother. The intensity of his gaze was anything but ordinary. Could it truly be there? As the final credits rolled, Ethan's body tensed, a deep yawn escaping his lips, the weight of the film's intensity still lingering in the air. I need to grab a drink. He stood up abruptly, his footsteps echoing as he made his way to the kitchen. I lingered on the couch, lost in a haze, scrolling through my phone as the world around me faded into the background. Moments later, his voice pierced the silence, echoing with urgency. "Hey, Rachel, is there anything you desire?" Of course, I replied, my heart racing. "Leave me breathless." As he stepped back into the room, his hands gripped 2 cups of cola, the tension in the air palpable. He settled back into his seat, inching closer, and extended his hand toward me, offering one with a weight that hung in the air. His knee grazed against mine, sending an unexpected jolt of electricity coursing through me, leaving me breathless and bewildered. "Thank you," I managed to say, struggling to keep my voice steady. He shrugged, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air, and took a sip, the tension palpable in the silence that followed. "It's not a problem at all." We lingered in a heavy silence, the air thick with unspoken words, as the faint hum of the television cast an eerie backdrop to our stillness. I struggled to concentrate on my phone, yet his presence loomed over me, an unsettling distraction that pulled at my thoughts. The warmth radiated from him, each fleeting brush of his knee against mine igniting a spark of electricity that sent shivers down my spine. It was nothing, I kept telling myself, as the weight of uncertainty pressed down on my chest. A mere matter of closeness, yet a small, restless part of me trembled with doubt. Ethan's voice sliced through the stillness, shattering the heavy silence with an abrupt remark. "What is it truly like to exist in the sprawling expanse of the big city? Do you ever feel that aching absence of this place?" His question seemed casual, yet the intensity of his gaze locked onto mine sent a shiver down my spine, forcing me to hesitate. I mean, yes, there were moments when I reluctantly confessed, my phone slipping from my grasp. Yet everything has shifted dramatically. I truly cherish the solitude of my own space, you understand. He nodded, a heavy silence enveloping him as he leaned back against the couch, the weight of unspoken words hanging in the air. "I see where you're coming from. It's unsettling, this void left by your absence. The silence here is deafening in your absence." A faint smile flickered across my lips. "Sometimes I find myself longing to be here," I confessed. "Yet everything shifts. People evolve and transform over time." "Yes," he mumbled, his voice barely a whisper, tinged with a haunting sense of loss. "I suppose they truly do." His words wrapped around my heart like a vice, tightening with every syllable. As the night deepened, our conversation flowed, laughter echoing through the shadows as we revisited old memories, playfully jabbing at one another over the smallest of details. The strange tension that had gripped me began to fade, giving way to a comforting warmth that stirred deep within, a poignant reminder of how profoundly I longed for this moment. My heart ached with his absence. As the weekend drew to a close and I found myself behind the wheel, a profound realization washed over me. Some bonds defy distance and time, remaining unbreakable, no matter the circumstances that separate us. Ethan was more than just my younger brother. He was my lifeline, the sole unwavering presence in the storm of my life. As I navigated the familiar streets back to my apartment, a fierce resolve ignited within me. I would not allow the days to stretch endlessly before I saw him again. I shot him a quick look, observing the depths of his intense focus, as if the world around him had faded away. His forehead creased with tension, and a grave expression settled on his face, one I had never witnessed before. It transformed him, casting an aura of age and maturity that sent a shiver down my spine. In that fleeting instant, he transformed before my eyes, no longer merely my younger brother, but a distinct individual, grappling with his own struggles and intricacies. The weight of that knowledge unsettled me, and I shifted just enough to break the heavy silence that enveloped us. "Well," I replied, forcing a smile that barely masked the weight of the moment, "you'll be out of here soon enough. College, a whirlwind of new friendships, and a life transformed beyond recognition." Perhaps he uttered with a dismissive shrug, "Yet it remains profoundly different. You've always been that person I could turn to, even in the darkest of times, when everything felt unbearably heavy." I repeated, my brow deeply furrowed. "What are you trying to say?" He momentarily diverted his gaze, lingering on the floor, before it snapped back to me with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. As Dad dove into his full-time job and Mom became consumed by her endless tasks, an overwhelming sense of solitude enveloped me. Yet, through it all, you remained a steadfast presence in my life. You simplified everything. His words struck me with a brutal force, and shame surged through me like a relentless tide. I was completely unaware of the profound effect my absence had on him, of the silent weight of his reliance on me that he never dared to voice. I offered my sincerest apologies, Ethan. He shrugged once more. Yet a subtle smile tugged at the edge of his lips, hinting at something deeper beneath the surface. "You bear no blame in this. Though you were grappling with your own struggles, a surge of relief washed over me at your presence." I nodded, my hand instinctively reaching out to grasp your shoulder, a silent promise of support. "And you understand that I am always here for you whenever you need me, don't you?" "Yeah," he said, his smile stretching across his face, a glimmer of something deeper lurking beneath the surface. "I comprehend." For a fleeting moment, the world felt as if it had returned to normalcy, effortless, seamless. As my hand lingered on his shoulder, an electric awareness of the charged atmosphere enveloped us. As our gazes locked, a flicker of vulnerability crossed his face, compelling me to instinctively pull my hand back. Heat flooded my cheeks as I quickly averted my gaze. With a deliberate clearing of my throat, I began to explain. "The hour grows late, and the weight of exhaustion presses upon us. Perhaps it is time to surrender to the night and seek the solace of sleep." "Yeah," he conceded, his body taut as he stretched, tension rippling through him. An intriguing concept. He approached the steps, halting at the bottom to cast a lingering glance back at me. "Sleep well, Rachel." "Good night," I whispered, the weight of the words hanging in the air. As I ascended the stairs, I forced a grin, but a gentle exhale revealed the tension I had been holding within, a breath I hadn't even known I was keeping back. My thoughts swirled in chaos, an unsettling feeling gnawing at me, whispering that something had shifted between us, yet I was unable to grasp the exact nature of that change. I switched off the television, the silence enveloping me as I stepped into the kitchen, my heart racing as I moved to rinse my glass. The house was enveloped in an unsettling stillness. The only sound piercing through the heavy air was the soft, relentless hum of the refrigerator, echoing like a heartbeat in the void. I lingered by the window, my gaze fixed on the haunting silhouettes of trees, their forms twisting and turning in the eerie glow of the moonlight. My thoughts spiraled wildly, a chaotic storm of ideas that eluded my grasp. As I finally sank into the bed, a restless turmoil churned within me, making sleep an elusive escape. I lay awake for what felt like an eternity, my eyes fixed on the ceiling, grappling with the unsettling unease that had enveloped every corner of my mind. Ethan's words hung in the air, his lingering stares pierced through me. The intensity of his gaze as he addressed me sent shivers down my spine. Everything felt charged with meaning, yet I found myself unable to articulate the reason behind it. The following morning I stirred from sleep, drawn by the haunting melody that drifted up from the kitchen, wrapping around me like a whisper of secrets yet to be revealed. Startled from my slumber, I bolted upright, my heart racing as I glanced at the clock, disbelief washing over me at the shocking hour. The sun loomed high in the sky, casting an intense glare that seemed to amplify the weight of the moment. With urgency, I threw on some clothes and descended the stairs, drawn by the haunting melody that echoed through the air. Ethan stood in the kitchen, the soft hum of a tune from the radio filling the air, as he meticulously prepared breakfast, unaware of the storm brewing just beyond the walls. He wore a simple t-shirt and sweatpants, his hair tousled and wild from a restless night, a stark contrast to the turmoil brewing within him. He brought back memories of the small boy I once teased and nurtured, yet there was something undeniably different about him now. His age and newfound confidence struck me like a bolt from the blue, leaving me momentarily stunned. "Good morning." As I approached, he lifted his gaze to meet mine, a silent anticipation hanging in the air. "I prepared eggs. Care for a taste?" "Of course," I responded, lowering myself into the chair at the table, the weight of the moment hanging in the air. "Thank you." He placed a dish before me, the weight of the moment hanging thick in the air as he settled into his chair across from me. His effortless smile shattered my concentration, pulling me away from the turmoil of my thoughts. For a while we sat in a heavy silence, the warm sunlight pouring through the windows, casting an almost haunting golden glow across the room. "This is good," Ethan declared, shattering the stillness that hung heavy in the air. "Your presence brings back a flood of memories, stirring emotions long buried, as if we've stepped into a moment frozen in time." I nodded, a faint smile playing on my lips, masking the turmoil beneath. "Truly does." Yet, as the words left my lips, an unsettling feeling gnawed at me, whispering that something was profoundly amiss. The once effortless bond we shared had been shattered, leaving behind an unexplainable void that gnawed at my very core. A sudden weight pressed against my chest, sending my thoughts spiraling into chaos. The weight of it pressed down on me, an undeniable truth I could no longer evade, no matter how desperately I fought against it. The morning slipped away in a haze of mundane tasks and familiar routines, yet the unspoken tension between us lingered, thick and palpable. Ethan seemed relaxed, whistling to the radio as he meticulously tidied the kitchen, while I busied myself with anything I could grasp in the tense silence that hung between us. Is there anything that can anchor my thoughts, keeping them from drifting away? Each glance, each utterance shared between us carried an unbearable weight, yet I found myself unable to articulate the reason behind it. As lunch approached, a storm of agitation brewed within me. Ethan suggested we watch another movie, but the thought of being still, trapped in that moment, sent a shiver of unease through me. "How about we step outside for a moment?" I proposed that perhaps the crispness of fresh air could sweep away the fog clouding my thoughts. Ethan's grin widened, a flicker of mischief dancing in his eyes. "That sounds absolutely thrilling. Allow me a moment to grab my sneakers." We stepped outside, venturing into the stillness of the neighborhood, where towering trees loomed overhead and meticulously manicured lawns stretched out before us, each step echoing with an unspoken tension in the air. The atmosphere was thick with an unsettling stillness, as if time itself had conspired to keep everything in a perpetual state of stasis. We found ourselves in a tense exchange side by side, discussing his classes, my job, and the neighbor's dog, whose incessant barking seemed to echo the urgency of our words. It surged back, an undeniable force, as if we were reclaiming a rhythm lost to time, a pulse that had eluded us for far too long. Even amidst our laughter and conversation, an undeniable tension hung in the air. I couldn't shake the awareness of his shoulder grazing mine, nor could I ignore the way his gaze lingered, heavy with unspoken words, when he believed I was oblivious to his watchful eyes. I convinced myself it was merely my imagination spiraling out of control. Yet, beneath the surface, I found myself unable to escape the harsh truth. As we neared the park at the end of the street, the sight of the creaking swings and the faded basketball court stirred a whirlwind of childhood memories, each one more vivid and haunting than the last. Ethan lingered on one of the swings, his long legs nearly grazing the ground, and beckoned for me to come closer, an unspoken tension hanging in the air. With a moment of uncertainty, I finally lowered myself into the swing next to him, the metal chains groaning softly, echoing the tension in the air as I leaned back. "This place remains untouched," he murmured, his voice heavy with a longing that pierced the air. "Yeah," I whispered as the memories surged through me like a relentless tide. The moment hung heavily in the air, brimming with unvoiced emotions and an indescribable tension that gripped my heart. With a faint smile I pressed on, "It feels as though we've lingered in this place for half of our childhood." "That is because we did," he said, laughter lacing his voice, a hint of something deeper lurking beneath the surface. Your relentless insistence on pushing me on the swings echoed in my mind, despite my desperate assurances that I could manage it alone. I returned the smile, recalling how you would leap off, only to crash down into the mud below. He let out a low chuckle, shaking his head slowly, as if the weight of the moment pressed heavily upon him. "Mom forced you to promise to shield me from danger." His laughter dwindled, and his eyes locked onto the distant horizon, a storm brewing within. His expression darkened, a heavy weight settling in the air. Your eyes were always on me, a relentless vigilance that never wavered. Without a doubt, I replied with kindness. You are my beloved little brother. He fell silent, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavily in the air. His expression was heavy with thought, and his eyes narrowed, hinting at an unspoken intensity. Then with a hint of trepidation he ventured, do you ever ponder how drastically our lives might have shifted if Dad had been more involved? The question struck me like a bolt from the blue. I gazed at him, a storm of uncertainty swirling within me, struggling to find the words that could capture the weight of the moment. After a brief moment of hesitation, I finally replied, I suppose. But you turned out remarkably well, you know. His approval is irrelevant. Your pride is yours to claim, unshackled and fierce. His gaze locked onto mine, a silent storm brewing between us. In that fleeting moment, the sheer vulnerability reflected in his eyes pierced through me, causing a deep ache in my chest. Thank you, he breathed, his voice barely a murmur. This holds immense significance. We fell into a heavy silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging between us, thick and suffocating. The distant echoes of the park pierced through the stillness, each sound heavy with unspoken stories. Whispers of rustling leaves, the frantic chatter of birds, and a haunting squeak from the swings linger in the air. It was serene, but the weight of his previous comments loomed heavily in the air, creating an unspoken tension between us. Ethan finally stood up, brushing the dust from his slacks with a determined flick of his hands. We must return, he insisted, his voice heavy with urgency. The chill is creeping in, wrapping around everything like a shroud. Yeah, I declared, standing up and matching his pace, the air thick with unspoken tension. The walk home stretched out, each step heavy with an unshakable weight. The silence that hung between us had transformed from a source of comfort into a weighty burden, laden with unspoken thoughts that neither of us dared to voice. As we approached the house, an overwhelming urge to escape to the guest room consumed me, desperate to find solace and quiet the chaos swirling in my mind. Yet Ethan's thoughts took a different turn. How about a game? He proposed, a wicked smile spreading across his face as he grasped the controller. Tonight, the one who falters will face the burden of washing the dishes. You're on, I declared, a flicker of excitement igniting within me, grateful for the escape from the weight of reality. For the next hour we plunged into the game, the air thick with fierce competitiveness and explosive laughter that ignited our spirits, drawing us deeper into the moment. As always, Ethan dominated the majority of the rounds, but in a surprising twist, I managed to snatch a couple of victories, leaving him visibly frustrated. By the end, the tension had finally eased, if only for a fleeting moment. We've endured so much together, particularly with Mom and Dad frequently absent from our lives. This shared experience creates an undeniable bond between us. He insisted, his voice rising, that it was not mere confusion. His voice now carries a haunting calmness. This is the depth of my emotions. And I know this defies the ordinary, yet I cannot deny the reality that looms before me. I rose from my bed, my heart racing as I began to pace the confines of the small room, desperately trying to unravel the chaos swirling in my mind. My thoughts swirled in a chaotic storm, struggling with the urge to comfort him while grappling with the chilling realization that everything had spiraled into chaos. I pivoted to confront him, my voice steady yet charged with urgency. Ethan, we can't keep going around in circles like this. None of us deserve this injustice. His expression trembled on the brink of revelation. A fleeting grimace of anguish flickered across his features. He muttered, his voice barely above a whisper, I'm not asking for anything. I felt it was crucial to share this with you. The raw sincerity in his voice struck me like a bolt, leaving me breathless and reeling. I drew in a deep, shaky breath and sank back into my seat, my shoulders heavy with the crushing burden of the moment. I find myself at a loss for words. He nodded again, a heavy silence enveloping him as he lingered at the entrance. He lingered for a moment, caught in a storm of uncertainty, torn between the urge to remain and the impulse to flee. As he finally emerged, the soft click of the door shutting behind him resonated like a sigh of relief, echoing the weight of what had just transpired. Yet, the constriction in my chest remained unyielding. I sat there, time stretching endlessly, my gaze fixed on the void surrounding me, grappling with the chaos of what had just unfolded. A heavy silence hung between us, an unspoken truth that gnawed at my insides. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but deep down, I felt the undeniable shift in the air. A fracture in what we once shared. A shift was in the air, and I could sense it deep within me. The following morning hung heavy in an unsettling silence. The entire house was suffused with an unsettling energy, as if the very air had shifted in the dead of night. Ethan chose to skip breakfast, and I made no attempt to change his mind. I told myself that he, just like me, craved some space, and that eventually everything would fall back into place as it once was. Yet, as the hours dragged on, the silence that enveloped us grew denser, an oppressive weight that was impossible to overlook. As the afternoon wore on, I resolved to shatter the silence that hung heavily in the air. I stumbled upon him in his room, perched on the edge of his bed, headphones enveloping him in a world of sound. As he caught sight of me knocking, he hesitated, removing them with a slow, deliberate motion, and offered a faint, uncertain smile that hung in the air, heavy with unspoken words. "Ethan, I promised you we'd find a way, but it won't be easy." "I understand," he said, his voice trembling with uncertainty. "But it's a struggle. I'm trapped within my own thoughts, desperately searching for a way to escape." I extended my hand, gripping his shoulder with a firm yet tender touch. "You are not alone," I whispered, my voice barely breaking the silence between us. "We will face this together no matter what comes our way." He lifted his eyes, locking onto mine with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. The weight of his gaze tightened around my chest, igniting a tumult of emotions within me. "Your unwavering presence has been my constant refuge," he replied, his voice trembling with raw emotion, a stark contrast to the silence that enveloped everyone else. "I can't imagine my life without you by my side." It rendered me utterly speechless. "I just want everything to be fine again," he said, his voice quivering with barely contained emotion. "I can't bear the thought of losing you." "You won't," I promised, though my voice trembled with uncertainty. "But Ethan, we must establish boundaries. This cannot be allowed to consume us." He nodded slowly, his face twisted in a troubled grimace. He uttered, "I know I am trying. Rachel, everything will be all right." I leaned in closer, my hand gently covering his, a silent promise hanging in the air between us. "This is but a fleeting moment, a mere whisper in time." At first he stood frozen in place. His gaze bore into me, the weight of the moment pressing heavily upon us both. He leaned in, uncertainty hanging in the air like a fragile thread. Our lips collided in a fleeting whisper, a moment charged with unspoken emotions that hung heavily in the air, leaving us both breathless and yearning for more. It ended as suddenly as it had started, plunging the space into a suffocating silence that weighed heavily on the air. Ethan recoiled, his expression a tumultuous blend of disbelief and worry. "I deeply regret my actions," he stammered, his voice trembling with uncertainty. "I didn't mean to." "No, Ethan," I interrupted, forcing my voice to remain steady. "Refrain from expressing regret." He locked eyes with me, searching for a hidden truth in my gaze. A subtle smile tugged at my lips as I whispered, "Damn. My brother is undeniably handsome." I found myself taken aback as I noted his brief pause, a moment heavy with unspoken words. He leaned in once more, silence hanging heavily between them. This time the kiss plunged deeper, a bold declaration of our newfound resolve, as if we were daring to explore the very limits we had only just breached. We paused for a fleeting moment, my hand shifting to a new territory, propelling us further into the depths of what we had already dared to explore. His eyes widened, mirroring my disbelief, yet neither of us dared to retreat. We stood in silence, allowing it to unfold, spiraling into a realm far beyond our wildest expectations. What we did was dangerously impulsive, and I couldn't deny it any longer. Yet, in that fleeting instant, everything seemed to align flawlessly. It was an exhilarating experience. As the dust finally settled, we lay there, acutely aware of the gravity of what had just transpired. "Incredible." Ethan inhaled sharply, breaking the stillness that hung heavy in the air. "I truly find myself at a loss for words." "It's all right," I replied, my voice sharp as I interrupted him. "It's over, and now we can finally turn the page." He anchored me in that moment. His eyes brimmed with unvoiced questions that hung heavy in the air, begging to be released. He rose slowly, each movement heavy with intention, as though the very air around us might crack under the weight of our delicate connection. "Good night, Rachel," he murmured, his voice barely breaking the silence, laden with unspoken emotions. As the day draws to a close, I bid you a hauntingly quiet good night, I exclaimed, watching him stride out of the room. As the door clicked shut behind him, a wave of anxiety washed over me, my thoughts spiraling into chaos. In that brief instant, the world shifted irrevocably. A line had been crossed, plunging us into uncertainty that could either illuminate the truth or plunge us deeper into chaos. Uncertainty loomed over me, yet amidst the shadows, a flicker of hope ignited within my heart. For the first time in days, the thought of facing the unknown together filled me with a fragile yet powerful resolve. The next morning, an unsettling shift hung in the air, a stark contrast to the heaviness that had lingered before. Ethan joined me for breakfast, but there was an unsettling contrast in his demeanor. It was more relaxed than it had been in days, yet a storm seemed to brew beneath the surface. We engaged in a conversation about our plans, the words slipping from our lips with an ease that belied the weight of what lay ahead. It was a moment that shimmered with promise, and I clung to that flicker of hope as the hours dragged on, until the moment of my departure arrived. With a heavy heart, Ethan guided me toward the door, each step echoing with unspoken words and lingering uncertainty. Josh's absence lingered in the air, a bittersweet solace that wrapped around the silence of the house. I was forced to face this battle by myself. Your presence means everything. Thank you for staying. Ethan's smile flickered, a soft yet sincere glimmer that hinted at deeper emotions beneath the surface. It held immense significance. I'm relieved I made that choice, I replied. I will return shortly, all right? We'll continue our conversation and find a resolution to this tension. He nodded, his expression a fragile mask of hope, teetering on the edge of uncertainty. Absolutely, we will. As I drove away, the house slowly disappeared from my rearview mirror, yet the heavy burden of all that had transpired clung to me, refusing to let go. As I stood on the precipice of uncertainty, the weight of the days to come loomed heavy. Yet amidst the shadows of doubt, a flicker of hope ignited within me. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, I sensed a shift, a fragile yet undeniable progress. In that moment, it was enough to cling to, a lifeline in the storm. Back in my apartment, life fell into its familiar rhythm, yet an undercurrent of unease lingered in the air. Yet, despite my relentless efforts to erase that night from my mind, the haunting memories lingered on, refusing to fade away. My thoughts drifted to Ethan more often than I was willing to acknowledge, consumed by a nagging concern about his well-being, and whether he had finally found the clarity he so desperately sought. A few weeks later, my phone buzzed ominously, a message from him lighting up the screen. Hello, I wanted to express my gratitude once more. Amidst the chaos, a flicker of clarity emerges. I find myself navigating through the storm, holding on, and somehow, I am managing to stay afloat. I stared at the message, the weight of its implications pressing down on me, before finally mustering the courage to respond. I'm overwhelmed with joy. Take each step with deliberate care, feeling the weight of the journey ahead. I will always be there for you no matter what you face. His response was swift. I have faith that I will emerge from this unscathed. It wasn't quite the resolution they had hoped for, but it marked a significant step forward, and for the moment that had to suffice. Yet, a shadow of uncertainty looms over me, gnawing at my thoughts as I ponder the judgments of others. Was it truly wrong? Should I feel remorse for what transpired? Am I meant to carry this weight of guilt? I have no idea. Your thoughts are crucial. Please voice them in the comments below. It would hold immense significance. My deepest gratitude.